Hi guys, I'm finally back with another video. Sorry to keep you waiting. For this video, I want to talk about BYU versus BYU Idaho. To give you a little bit of context and a little bit of my background, I started at BYU Idaho. I was there for about 2 years and then I transferred to BYU Provo and then I got married and retransferred to BYU Idaho. So that's where I'm finishing my degree. So I feel like I have a little bit of experience with both. So I just wanted to share my thoughts. And I also want to clarify that this is how my experiences, and you might not have the same ones if you transfer to either one. But overall, based on how the things that I lived through and the things that my friends went through, this is kind of what you can expect. Okay, so the very first thing that I want to talk about is academics. The biggest difference between BYU Provo and BYU Idaho is what they base on. So BYU Provo bases their classes and their lectures a lot on research. The degrees that they offer have a lot more to do with research than BYU Idaho. For example, BYU Provo is very well known for their business, their engineering, their law, and their nursing classes, while BYU Idaho still offers some of those degrees, but they have more of a focus on agriculture and more experience based degrees. I do, like I said, I want to clarify that BYU Provo and BYU Idaho have mostly very similar undergraduate degrees. One of the big differences also between BYU Provo is that BYU Provo does not offer an associate's degree. So if you were to get an associate's degree from a school and you try to transfer to BYU Provo to get a bachelor's degree, they would just transfer as credits, not as a degree. So that's one thing to be aware of. BYU Provo also offers grad school. So, like I said, in business and in law, those are their big graduate degrees. BYU Idaho does offer associate degrees, but they don't offer grad school. Let's say that you got an associate's degree from BYU Idaho and tried to transfer to BYU Provo, that would only transfer as credits, not as an actual degree. So that's kind of sad. Now let's talk a little bit about classes. So class sizes at BYU Provo, they're normally a little bit bigger. They have a lot more lecture halls. It's a little bit harder to get to know your professors one on one, at least at the beginning. As you get more into your degree, you might have smaller classes depending on how big your degree is in general. But because of that, a lot of professors communicate through their TAs. So you would almost never reach out to the professor because they almost never respond themselves. You would have to reach out to the TA. The TA would communicate with the professor would communicate with the TA, and then with you. So it's a little bit longer of a process. It's not as personal. So if you want to have a good networking, get to know your professors type of situation, BYU Idaho is a little bit better for that because the classrooms are smaller. There are less lecture halls. Your professors get to know you by name almost always. You get to know them, you can communicate with them directly and everything. So that's one of the benefits of BYU Idaho. One of the pros about BYU Provo is that I'm pretty sure most of the professors actually have a PhD. So they have a doctorate's degree, while at BYU Idaho, they can teach with just a master's. I'm pretty sure they can also teach online with just a bachelor's. That's one other thing. That's why I feel like BYU Provo is a lot more research based because the professors are actually like doctors. Another comparison between BYU Provo and BYU Idaho is that BYU Provo has more difficult homework, while at BYU Idaho you still have homework, but it feels a lot more relevant to the things that you're studying and the things that you're learning in class. And obviously, again, this is from me as a communications major. I don't know, like if you're studying pre-med, if you're in pre-med or something, if it would be different, it probably would be, but that's my experience. I've mentioned this in the last video, but one of the big make it or break it situations with BYU Idaho is that you can't find as much work as you could in Provo. And the work that you could find is not necessarily, they don't pay as much. The cost of living in Rexburg is lower. So housing is cheaper, groceries are cheaper, gas is sometimes cheaper, but also so are jobs. They don't pay as well. I know a lot of people that because of the three-track system that I've talked about last time, a lot of people go home to work in their state and save up all their money so they can come back, and because here they don't, it doesn't pay very well. Provo has major cities around it, so has Orem, it has Lehigh, it has Salt Lake pretty close by. Because of that, you can have a very good job. You can also do a lot of networking that way. um, and they pay quite a bit better. So to put it into context, in Rexburg, if you get a job, you could expect to make about $12 an hour, while in Provo you could expect to make about 15 or $16 an hour. Another thing to consider while choosing between BYU Idaho and BYU Provo is the population size. If you're the kind of person that likes a little bit of a smaller city feel, then Rexburg is for sure the place to go. It's pretty full of people, but there's no traffic on the roads, and you can actually, go to Walmart in like 5 minutes. While Provo has become in the past probably 10 years so much more populated. There's a lot of cars, there's a lot of traffic, and that's all around Provo. So Utah County is just very, very populated and a lot of traffic. So most people in Provo actually, if they have a car, they don't really use it. They normally use bikes or scooters to get around. While in Rexburg, I think it's more common to see cars, also because of the weather, but it's more common to see cars because it's not as horrible to drive around. One more thing to consider while choosing BYU Idaho or BYU Provo is if you have served a mission. I would say that if you have served a mission, most people that you're gonna meet are gonna go to Provo just because there are so many schools around it. So, they might go to BYU, they might go to UVU, they might go to U of U. Either way, they're all like within 40 minutes to like an hour and a half away. While if you come to BYU Idaho, you might not have as many of your mission friends because BYU Idaho is really the only big school around. There's ISU, but that's like 2 hours away in Pocatello, and I don't think as many members go there. So those are a few things to consider. If you're really shy and you don't easily make friends, I would probably suggest to go to BYU Idaho just because everyone's so willing to make friends, so excited to make friends. They have activities always going on. While BYU Provo, if you already have a good group of friends, it can be super fun because they do a lot of things, but they're not as open to meeting new people. There's like a lot more, I don't want to call it cliques, but kind of cliques. There's a lot more groups that are very specific with the activities that they do, the things that they like, and unless you fit in exactly right, you might not fit in with them. So yeah, so those are my thoughts about BYU Provo versus BYU Idaho. If you have any questions or if you have any topics that you would want me to discuss, just leave them in the comments. I love to talk to you more about them.